Good afternoon, attendees. I'm Danielle Casey, the Executive Vice President with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, here to welcome you and share just a little bit of housekeeping as we get started today. Thank you again for joining us. This webinar is being recorded. So following today's program, we'll be sending a post-webinar survey. Please do fill that out if you have a moment. It helps us continue to improve and come up with new ideas for future programming. And the bonus at the end is you'll get a link to this recording right away before we share it with the world or post it on our website later, which we will do. If anybody has any technical issues or just general questions about working in Zoom or the process for today's conversation, please use the chat function in your Zoom toolbar. But if you have a question for a speaker, we do ask that you please submit it using the Q&A tool. That will work to ensure that we get as many questions answered as possible. But if we're not able to tackle all of them, then we can track those and follow up with you post-webinar. So this webinar is the third in a series, produced in partnership with Experis IT, and we've been having a great time on all of these programs. Experis IT is located in Sacramento. It's the technical arm of Manpower Group with more than 70 years of global workforce solutions expertise. They specialize in technical project solutions and professional resourcing across all areas of IT. Which is why we're working with them on these topics. They have a scalable and flexible delivery model with expertise in connecting the right candidates to the right opportunities. And their expertise in verticals range from infrastructure, data analytics, development, information security, and outsourced managed services. So if you can name it or list it, they've got it. So we couldn't be more thrilled, again, to partner with them for our third in this series to bring you this really amazing lineup of speakers. The first two programs that we've launched have actually been about companies pivoting into this new area. And actually, Olivia, I believe we have a quick poll that you can put up while I finish explaining and leading in regarding how many folks, have you seen our previous webinars in this series? Is this your first one? Have you seen the previous one? Maybe just one of them, or have you seen both? So please feel free to vote here, and then she'll show us the results there just so we can get a sense of who has seen the prior information. So the first two programs, they were focused on the here and now. They were talking about companies pivoting into the new era and beginning to resume normal operations, either from home or even with limited in-office staff. And they are both still available and will continue to be available on demand on our website if you missed either of them. So now today we're focusing on shifting into the new normal. Okay, so we've got about half the folks are new, and then about the other half have seen at least some of our previous programming. So this is great to have some of you joining us again. I love, those are the good kind of repeat offenders. So and now that it's a new normal, and we say that with our script and talking points today, but then the world today is very different than it was even a week ago in our last session, because we're seeing some new waves of COVID and, closing down of bars for the 4th of July. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with myself. But anyway, we are going to talk about the way businesses will never be the same. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And it'll be focused today forward as industry leaders share insight into what things could look like and what they think they will look like in a post-COVID-19 world. So I'm very excited about today's conversation. Without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our moderator, Jennifer Hall. Jennifer is the Sacramento Innovation Lead for Accenture. She's an innovation leader at Accenture with 20+ years of experience, where she is focused on digital transformation and has designed tools and techniques to introduce and cultivate innovation that's implementable. Her experience ranges from high tech, telecommunications, aerospace and defense, as well as state and local government. And in addition, she leads the design and development of Accenture's innovation space in Sacramento at the very hip and cool Ice Blocks. Jennifer, thank you so much for helping us out today. Thanks for moderating, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Danielle, for that introduction. And boy, do I miss working down at the Ice Blocks right now. Such a fantastic place in downtown Sacramento. I'm really excited to be here today and to talk to help guide this conversation. But we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has fundamentally changed the world as we know it. People are living differently, buying differently, and in many ways they're thinking differently, being forced to adapt so quickly. What we think is that the habits that are being formed will endure beyond this crisis and will be permanently changing what we value how and where we shop, and how we live and work. Long-term trends have been accelerated. The changes that we kind of anticipated and predicted over the next few years have occurred in the space of a few weeks. We'll hear some of those stories today from our panelists. And what we see is that this is forcing companies to rapidly adapt as demand for both products and services outstrip supply. And one kind of interesting number I saw is that there's 160% expected increase in e-commerce purchases from new or low frequency users. So what we're really seeing is a fundamental change in how people are approaching their goods and services. But also we're seeing that significant change both in online connections, Zoom calls between 50, 60-year-old classmates who are connecting together for the first time. So we're seeing fundamental changes. And so I think that's really something to think about in terms of where business is going to go. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel we do have today and look forward to hearing from them and their perspectives. First, we have Shehzad Ahmed, the Vice President of Global Cloud Operations for PowerSchool, Lou Del Zompo, the Chief Technology Officer for the California Community College Technology Center, and Alan Jones, Executive Director of Medicare Sustainability for Sutter Health. As we kick off with the first question, I'll let each panelist introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about themselves before we go into it. So Shehzad, how about we start with you?
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And thanks everyone for being here as well. I'm excited to share my knowledge and gain from other people at the same time in this interactive discussion. I've been in the IT industry for some time now, and for the last 15 years being part of many software companies across, I think, 4 different continents, and right now settled in US, working in a software company, K-12 industry in EdTech, and I run the global cloud operations for all of our portfolio products. And we take care of, I think, 38 different products across so many different countries. And with our systems, PowerSchool has close to 70% of the K-12 EdTech market share in United States. So a pretty big spectrum.
Thank you. And Lou, how about you?
Sure, thanks, Jennifer. I'm Lou Del Zompo. As mentioned, I'm the CTO for a unit of the California Community College System. My organization does many of the system-wide applications and services, like the application to college and our statewide data warehouse, those kinds of things. It's obviously a challenge. We're the largest system of higher education in the United States, at least, if not the world. We have regularly educate up to 4 million individuals every term, and across 115 different colleges in California. We also have a lot to do with the statewide fiber optic network, scenic, that everything gets connected to. So everything from low-level networking to high-level web applications and services, that's what I get to pay attention to. So thanks for the opportunity to be on the panel. Thank
you. And Alan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I feel a little bit like a Charlie in the Box as the only non-IT professional on the call. At Sutter Health, I'm in charge of Medicare sustainability, and as a nonprofit, my job is to help us develop strategies and implement products that'll make our Medicare mission more sustainable long into the future. We, serve around 500,000 to 600,000 Medicare beneficiaries a year, and my job is to make that more sustainable for us. It's I think if you're following the news at all, you know that Medicare doesn't reimburse what it costs to deliver care in Northern California. So working through those things, but I think I'll have some interesting perspectives to add to the conversation nonetheless.
And Alan, the first question I'm going to ask, I'll actually start with you, so setting you up so it's no surprises.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about the areas of business that Sutter has identified that need to be adapted to maintain productivity? Or have you identified some new skills or qualities that would be needed to maintain a productive workforce?
this one's interesting because it's a little bit like rubbing your head and patting your belly at the same time. We have, no, you know, in addition to those 500,000 Medicare beneficiaries we're going to see, we see all the commercial patients. We have 50,000 employees, or over 50,000 employees that have to be productive. So we've seen some really interesting ways that we've had to connect and virtualize our workforce basically overnight. The March 13th was my last day in the office. About 6 weeks in, I experienced the standard culture shock of, you know, this doesn't feel right, and I was depressed, and now I'm kind of back on the upswing and adopting the new technologies. Our patients adapted much faster. So before coronavirus, we did about 25 telemedicine visits per day. Now we're up to 7,000 visits per day. So, you know, that 160% e-commerce, we've blown that out of the water in the way that we've done it. And that's been a twofold adoption curve. So we've got, you know, both our providers, so the doctors generally at first were very skeptical of the ability to deliver care telephonically and with video calls, and the patients were skeptical of it. And now we've gotten to the point where, just like me, they're on the upswing in that adoption curve, and we're hearing like these amazing stories of actually better care when we're talking to people from their home with their care, you know, their team around them. So you know, they might be talking to a patient who is having, you know, some trouble, and when they came into the office, they said, "No, I'm fine. I'm sleeping fine. I don't wake up." And then when they're on the video call with their doctor, you hear over their shoulder, "That's not true." And you get the real story. And we're seeing that both the providers are saying, "Hey, this is a better way to deliver care for our patients and for us. We don't have all of this crazy building with the rooming and all of that." We get more about where are they when they're, you know, in their daily life. How are they actually living, not just how they tell us they're living. So that's been really good. But, you know, we're still experiencing some of the same things. You know, today's a Tuesday. Every Tuesday morning, I still get, you know, a little bit mournfully. I had a war room, you know, reservation at one of our very, you know, highly sought after conference rooms that I would bring my team together and we would be working on stuff face to face, and we've had to figure out ways to get around it. So, you know, that's a little bit about how we've changed and how we've experienced the change. Now, the biggest thing that and what I've been really impressed with is our ability to ramp up that capacity. If you can imagine that a system that was designed to do 25 telemedicine visits has to scale pretty quick to get to 7,000 in just a couple of weeks, and it's been mostly seamless. You know, I know that behind the scenes, the IT professionals have been running around bringing on more capacity for us, so that, you know, I can be home and dialing in through the VPN and be connected. So that's been pretty impressive for an organization the size of Sutter to have almost no outages as we've gone through ramping up from, you know, a few people working from home every once in a while to almost everyone working from home almost every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just some numbers that I know Accenture just published today that are the numbers of virtual consultations went from 36% of the population prior to COVID to 73% after. So that definitely is reflected in your comments as well. Yeah. And the other thing is that we see that consumers setting new habits, 40% of them, 40% rather than those who are just using it, expect to consider using that health technology in the future too. So indicative of the changing habits. Yeah. Lou or Shahzad, any points that you'd like to add on that question?
Well, on the technical side, I mean, I can echo what Alan said about, you know, how individual staff members at the colleges, as well as faculty and students, of course, have adapted to the new normal. And, you know, it's been fascinating to see the level of detail that we've all had to go down into just to kind of keep the business rolling. You know, so many paper processes that just can't work now because you can't hand a paper to somebody to sign anymore. So one of the challenges we've had in IT is the proliferation now of these things that are called low code offerings. So for example, Smart Sheets is one of them. Google Forms, even AWS Honeycode. They're basically solutions for kind of linking together basic things like spreadsheets and forms and other things into pseudo applications to kind of get around some of the reasons we talked about before, where you just can't see people. And what's been challenging is you've got things like cyber security to deal with. You've got, what kinds of regulations do you apply? Are you following HIPAA? Are you following COPA? All of these kinds of things are now, we have to look at, well, we've unleashed the masses of people developing their own applications now. How do we make sure that we're doing the right thing, basically? So that's been a big new area for us.
Absolutely. Shazad, how about for you? Any perspective?
I agree with Lou and Alan both's comments. I think culture shock definitely was there for some of our staff members. We had another issue as well. So as being a technological firm, being remote and working in distributed teams in 4 different time zones, that was normal for us anyway. But what we learned all of a sudden, for example, was that our products, because we offer distant learning applications to schools and parents and teachers and kids, and there was a spike that was ranged from somewhere 350 to, in some cases, up to 5,000% within a space of 2 weeks. And everybody who was previously not adopting to the electronic methods of learning or student information, etc., they were all of a sudden rushing towards it. So it wasn't so much of us having to transform our own working methods. It was the scale that we had to go through within a space of 2 weeks and learn the art of not only scaling the systems, but also keeping the staff morale whilst they were struggling with the emotional aspect that Alan mentioned, that, oh, this is the new norm. And so we had to scale that high with that human element. And so the agility of the team really was the new thing that we really resonated with, how resilient human race generally is at the same time in the time of crisis like this, which was good crisis for the company because the business was like there's never been before. At the same time, the same resources were having to spend 30 hours out of 24 hours every single day in making that work. And one of the challenges that we had was a small challenge in one of our teams. We have a center of excellence in India, and we learned that a lot of people who were no longer able to work in the offices had to work from their places. And we never, until that moment, never realized those people were not even taking their laptops home with them. So we had to coach them to take their laptops home. Then we learned that they didn't have internet in their places. And so we had to provide hotspots, etc., which then brought another aspect that I think Lou's touched upon briefly, was the security. That not only we were now no longer in our offices, we were also in untrusted networks and this honeycomb of network that is now spread all over the world. Engineers and various consultants and contractors logging in from various Wi-Fi devices into these secure data centers where we had embassy rooms previously set up to make sure direct access was only provided to some key individuals. All of a sudden we had to expand our horizon in how do we trust these variety of external links and continue to keep the integrity of data whilst provide that scale that was needed as well. So it was a bit of a interesting challenge, I would say, for the first month.
I think your point really about the resiliency of humans is coming through, and frankly, the creativity that comes with the non-negotiable parameters that COVID has put up. So really, you do see humans being pushed to innovate and to act differently than ever before. You also brought up kind of 2 other points about the access to technology and the access to information. And so, Lou, I'm going to start with you on this question, but can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted and changed the way that your organization supports your customers and constituents? And particularly, how are you addressing issues around the digital divide? So meaning people who might not necessarily have access to technology outside of, say, the classroom or the workplace, or the access to high-speed internet. So the kind of divide between the technology haves and the have-nots. You know, how are you handling that accessibility, and what is some of the thinking you guys have done around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've always understood in the demographics of community colleges that uh, the majority of our students are in the underserved area of our culture. And what goes along with that are things like, on average, most students, the only internet access they have is the cell phone. And on top of that, the cell phone is shared with other members of the family. So they don't have, dedicated internet access for things like doing their homework and other kinds of assignments. Now you have a situation where they're required to be on the internet during class time in order to participate in the Zoom session that the faculty is using to teach. Many colleges and ourselves, we've adopted some rather creative ways of doing things. It ranges from roving buses that go through a community and students can hop on the bus and the bus has internet access, to parking at a parking lot in the community, and then putting hotspots in like a few cars in the parking lot, so that there's internet access for those students in that parking lot. These kinds of things are very, very creative. The access for the computers, we've been, again, very lucky that some corporations we do business with in the state have responded by donating laptops, donating Chromebooks, these kinds of things. And so there's a picture of one of our colleges, like the second weekend to the COVID shutdown, where they had a line of cars about 200 or 300 long of students coming up to get a laptop, get a hotspot, get access cards to different services and things like this. So it's been kind of like a good example of what Shahzad was talking about, that human adaptivity, to see those kinds of things happen. And of course, as in the IT side, our job is really to facilitate these kinds of mechanisms that other people are, quite frankly, thinking of. But that's been really interesting. We've had to go to a tool. We chose one called Mobile Iron, but there's a lot of remote management tools out there where we can go and update an image on a laptop remotely and take over the laptop if someone's having problems and so it's always been a wise move in the past, but you had a place where students and faculty could bring a laptop in and the computer group would fix it for them. Now there's no place to bring it in, so you have to try and fix it remotely. So that's been interesting. It's really forced us to take a look at things like virtual device interface activity or Chromebooks with another eye towards, even though this doesn't quite make the IT job all that much easier, it makes it simpler for the people who are using the systems in a lot of ways. And so we've done a lot more experimentation with that. That has led to things like looking at AWS workspaces, where we can scale the performance of the image to match the needs of that user. So rather than have just a sort of standard, generic laptop image where you get a certain amount of performance, we've been able to scale that up sometimes into an equivalent of a pretty good size healthy server for somebody that needed to be able to do some physics courses or these kinds of things like that. So that's been pretty interesting. So that, I think, covers most of the things that occurred to me. But really, we spent a lot of time over the previous couple of years getting all of our operations in the cloud, getting ourselves prepared for disasters like the Paradise campfire, you know, where they shut down Butte College and we had to continue to keep working. So we've had already some preparations for it. And like Shahzad, I was very pleased to see how resilient the cloud turned out to be for us. You know, just basically all the hype about, oh, you can scale on demand and stuff, it was true. You know, it worked. We didn't have a single outage, and we had one service. It's a mechanism where it assists with the onboarding process for a student. It's called MyPath. And we had one set of metrics that went up, and it showed that a 500% increase in the utilization of that tool, right? Sort of like in the first couple of weeks right after the shutdowns. And so, you know, it's been, I think, pretty rewarding to see, you know, the kinds of impact we're able to have on individuals' lives like that.
Thank you so much, Lou. Alan or Shahzad, any comments there, you know, particularly around the accessibility for your employees or your constituents? I think you both mentioned a couple of scenarios in some of your opening remarks.
I think for us, like Lou, being a technological company, we're in 6 different cloud providers. We ourselves were pretty much disaster ready, so to speak, and could withstand the, on a drop of a hat, go remote. What we had to learn very quickly also was that our audience, in this case, the students, their parents and teachers in some cases, were not really into as much of technological advancement as the providers were. So there was a bit of a divide that I definitely became aware of, where schools were in a absolute frenzy, purchasing Chromebooks and tablets and laptops from suppliers. Some of the suppliers are, like, we have a very strategic partnership with Microsoft, and I learned from them, they were actually giving away a lot of the equipment for schools to pay back later on, so they could actually help the students. And then you kind of get exposed to this undertone that you're not aware of previously, that there are some challenged areas in the society. There are groups of people who are not only challenged in terms of not ever having a device itself, but also once you give them a device, they don't know how to use it. So there was a bit of a challenge in that aspect from the kids from certain challenged areas, some ethnic minority communities who were having to not only live to learn remotely and do their learning remotely, but also double learning, because the parents who previously hadn't paid attention to either technology or kids' school were now having to take 50% extra part in both things. So watching that divide shrink and watching that technical virus, if I can use that pun, technical virus spread unilaterally on all the districts, and we have some statewide districts as our customers, and to see that impact on the real little humans in such a space of time was actually encouraging and rewarding.
Great story there, and definitely the demand for laptops. We certainly saw that with the clients that we support, and in converting, helping to convert some of our clients over a weekend from in-person working to remote working. Certainly you saw some of the supply chain pressures as well, but also, you know, people looking for ways to make things work. And I think that's one of the really fascinating stories out of COVID. Alan, how about you? Any perspective?
I just had a flashback when Shaz was talking. I have 2 elementary school children and had to help them with their classes for the last several months. That was rough. My team, you know, it was like at least partially virtualized before we started this. The main challenge has been a couple of the things that we do. We try and help seniors get educated about Medicare coverage. So for most people, the first time that they actually shop for insurance is, you know, really shop for insurance is going to be when they're shopping for Medicare coverage. Up until then, you're getting it from your employer for most of us. And you might have to pick between 3 or 4 options, but it's not just, the world's your oyster, pick whatever you want. And we generally have been doing those and it through a brick and mortar kind of face-to-face Medicare 101 meetings. We had to pivot that work to much like this call, webinars. It's had the dual challenge again of internally getting ourselves used to this different way of kind of communicating and educating seniors about insurance coverage, and then helping them to find their way to us through this new path. So that's been interesting. It's still very, very early. It's an area where it's going to take a little bit longer, I think, to burn in. Like I think Lou and Chaz mentioned, some of the groundwork had been laid. A lot of we work with another local company called eHealth. They have an office in Gold River, and we've been working with them for a while, and we've been seeing that more and more of the kind of insurance kind of question and answer has been happening online. So some infrastructure existed. It's just pivoting to that as our only path has been a challenge for us.
Well, I think the way that you can reimagine how we do work or how we do education based upon this new normal, maybe that sounds a little frou-frou, but actually we can do work differently and we can do things differently. And if you try to force it, and this is how we used to do business with the new parameters we have, it's going to be challenging. But if you can kind of consider it as this is what we're trying to do, we're trying to provide this level of education, or we want to provide this level of information, there are new ways to do it, including being supported by the cloud, which is what we both heard Lou and Shahzad mention about the sustainability of the cloud and the flexibility. And so that's the next question I wanted to ask you, Shahzad, but with the now mostly remote workforce, how much utilization of the cloud has been expanded with your organization as a result of COVID-19? I think you threw out a couple numbers there that were fascinating. And are you continuing to look for more expansions? And then also, if you could touch on the security component as well, and the cybersecurity issues that have arisen. Certainly with this tool we're using here, Zoom, we all saw that at the beginning when they saw skyrocketing use in their tool, and then commensurate security issues that have since been resolved or mitigated. But certainly that's something to think about as we continue this accessibility. So Shahzad?
Yes, so a couple of areas in terms of the security first. If you look at it, as the usage grew for the products, hackers and the malicious actors in the world have also risen up to the challenge. They know there is a lot more data now flowing through that they didn't have access to, because there are so many different endpoints that are tougher for organizations and corporates to manage. So actually, FBI put out an advisory a few days ago saying K-12 industry is going to be targeted by the hackers through a very specific remote desktop protocol that we all use to jump into our sessions remotely. And we've definitely seen a high increase. And it's in 3-4 digits in percentage wise, how many hacking attacks companies are seeing. We had to go and invest a couple $1 million extra to beef up our threat management posturing, and to ensure that we were on the live basis 24/7, 365, now scanning more so than we ever did in getting these malicious activities coming into our data centers, or constantly looking for signs of data exfiltration and any credentials being sold on the dark web, etc., which is now become the reality. So I think the challenge has never been like this before, and we're definitely having to ramp up. In terms of the cloud spread, I think we're lucky in PowerSchool because all of our products are in the cloud. At the same time, what has happened is we sell our products. Some of our schools and districts purchase our products and host them themselves. And as a result of this COVID-19, we're seeing that a lot of those customers are also coming to us and then wanting to trust us in our data center facilities to host their applications much quicker than what we were previously advocating for. We already have tens of thousands of customers using our various products in AWS, Azure, Rackspace, Google, and now we're seeing another wave demand coming from the customers wanting to not host it themselves and leverage the public cloud model where they can see evidently the scale that we were able to achieve without bringing any downtime, like Lou mentioned as well. So that was my 2 cents.
We did have one question come in on the Q&A. We actually had a couple questions, so I'll hit the second one first. But as it relates to cybersecurity, do you prefer to hire for those purposes internally, or do you contract with others to provide these services? I'll say for Accenture, we prefer to be the one providing the services. We do that. It's we're one of the #1 security technology firms in the world, but certainly that's something we help our clients with. Is this something that you can do internally, or is it something that you need some external advice for? But if any of you guys want to hit on that question, feel free.
I think it's a balance, to be honest with you. I don't think we can put all our eggs in either external basket or an internal basket, because there's so many areas of specialty now about things relating to security and to potential areas of access into what is considered to be very sensitive data. For example, we ask a question of individuals when they're applying to community college to self-identify if they're a member of a particular group of our humanity, basically. And some of the questions asked are ones if perhaps the student, who's maybe 17 years old, hasn't even told their family about some of these life choices that they're looking at. And so there's not only a legal responsibility, but a moral and ethical responsibility to be safeguards of that data. And so it isn't, the funny thing is, it isn't really new to COVID. We've had this situation for a long, long time where we are shepherds of very sensitive data and we have to be very careful about it. We have availed ourselves of many consultants over the years that have provided us with help, and Accenture being one of them. And then we also have built up over time, internal to our organization, a security group. And now one of the services that our team at the Technology Center provides is to educate colleges on the kinds of things they should be doing. We actually have a couple of people who specialize in trying to break in past the firewalls and show people what the threat posture is. And almost every college they've tried, they've managed to get some very sensitive passwords from some very high level people in the organization. So we do have work to do on that. And I think there's a balance, to be honest, for how to answer that question.
I think a balance is right on. And certainly, being thoughtful about the data you need and the data you need to be keeping and the data you shouldn't be keeping probably applies to all three of you on the call and your businesses, but particularly I'd imagine in the health industry as well with the HIPAA requirements too.
Yeah, HIPAA was how I got into healthcare, was from the technology side, implementing HIPAA. And our biggest area where we see difficulties is Sutter, we don't do everything ourselves. We have a lot of trading partners. And the ability of those vendors and partners to meet the security requirements has been a blocker, literally. Some companies that have really innovative solutions, people we'd like to do business with, they just can't meet the security requirement. They can't get through our security risk assessment process that it would take for us to responsibly start doing business with them. So that ends up being a rate limiting factor for us sometimes, is ability of companies to rise to the occasion and implement the security protocols that it would take to do business with, and have access to the millions of healthcare records that we're managing on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have another question that's come in, and this is about the skill set for the future. And so when we think about what the needs are going to be in the future, but there appears to be an increase for staff to have higher digital, cyber, cloud computing, virtual skills to continue to work and collaborate remotely. And what's your approach for training or upskilling existing staff or faculty teachers to meet these new requirements? And are you anticipating a shift in hiring practices? What are the skills you most need today and into the future? From Accenture's perspective, and from what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to hire for, are people with creativity, adaptability, and resilience, along with the technical and business skills you need. But I think the ability to communicate and to work with others across different cultures, different time zone is going to be just as much of a business imperative as a technical background. So frankly, when I'm looking at a straight up engineer, I want to know if this person is also going to be able to present on a virtual call and to share this information. It doesn't mean that, I won't want them to do some engineering jobs, but definitely I think the demand for those who can be flexible across workforces or types of work is going to be critical. But Shaz, how about you? Any perspective on upskilling your staff or training your staff?
Yeah, upskilling is in the world of IT and technology. Upskilling is an uphill battle. It's part of the job, because technology changes so much that even from the basic digital needs of how to do stuff, it moves the underlying technology changes. So we constantly ensure that we have some basic training programs for all of our staff. And those staff take those courses internally. They're available to our staff for free. At the same time, we then continue to go, and I challenge my whole leadership team within my org as well. And we continue to find other areas where other companies like us and the businesses like us are doing something differently. And even sometimes watching YouTube videos, providing a 5-minute clip to say, okay, this is how another person has done it. Let's not reinvent the wheel. If there is a third-party company that's providing the similar skills, if there is the wheel has been invented before, then let's go exploit it. And another aspect in that training comes about the agility, which Jennifer, you mentioned. It's a great point as well. Is the COVID-19, if anything it's done, is helped us all understand that there is no such thing as 9-to-5 job. There is no such thing as I used to only do X, and now, unless it's my job description, I'm not going to do Y. And we're seeing that across the spectrum. It's not just in our company. We're seeing that in the non-technological areas of our company. We're seeing that in the customer base, which is not always the most advanced in terms of technical adoption. And people are having to work different hours. People are having to juggle their work alongside their family members. So they're having to explore into different sections of their brain. And that's where we're consistently identifying, and it's an interesting thing for me, is we're identifying areas of training that are needed for people that 3 months ago I didn't think needed training in the first place. And now we're all of a sudden realizing there were people who could have a face-to-face conversation, but are actually not very good on coming up on remote and presenting something to someone, or be able to fish information on their own, because we didn't realize they didn't even know how to do some basic query in the databases, because they were always able to get help from the guy next door or on the sitting right next to them. So it's a bit of a combination of a few things, and there is definitely a shift in hiring patterns as well, and we are looking for that agile mindset. If people exhibit in the interviews now, and all of those interviews are remote too, if they exhibit a personality trait where they went outside of their comfort zone and learned something new, then even if they're only able to do 40% of the job, we hire them, because that's the mindset that we need, and we can train them our business ourselves.
And Lou, I think the concept of lifelong learners is certainly something that the community colleges can help with too. And
Sure.
like how you get learning, how you do learning. It feels like that organization might be one of the ones that are the most innovative in delivering how learning happens and how job training happens.
Yeah, it's interesting over the years how the main mission of the community college system in California has changed. And as you indicated, it's expanded into areas that heretofore weren't considered, the sort of junior college experience. What is perhaps the most interesting is the public-private partnerships that have emerged. So, for example, you've got something called I think it's called the AWS Cloud Learner program that is in partnership with Santa Monica College down south, where AWS has said, if you take this eight series of classes, or series of 8 classes, and you pass, not only do you get a certificate from the community college system, but we'll give you a job. And you see the same kinds of things happening across the spectrum. Intel has a partnership now in artificial intelligence with community colleges. You just look at lots of different areas. Walmart is famous for doing this as well. And now we see this going down into things like welders, for example, getting a welding certificate, taking, I think it's 4 classes for a welding certificate, you get a job that's $85,000 a year as a welder. These kinds of things can really have a dramatic effect on bootstrapping people. One of the things we worry about in the COVID era, though, in the community college system, is that it's a truism that at the times of the most dire economic circumstances, the demand for learning goes through the roof. And I can tell you that our metrics are showing that in an average year, we get around 2.1, 2.2 million applications to community college every year. And around 600,000 to 700,000 of those applications convert to students. We've already seen close to 4 million applications to community college for this fiscal year, almost doubling that application rate. And the requests for accounts to be able to start the process have outstripped that by another 2 million. So the thing I most worry about is that our budget situation will prevent people from getting the learning that'll help them get the jobs and they need to get out of this economic situation. So, but to address the question specifically about how we're dealing with within our system, we, as you might imagine, have a learning management system that we've developed with specific skills for faculty and staff. And then we back that up. I think we use the learning management system Cornerstone, and we back that up with online courses from a variety of places. Honestly, it's amazing how much is available. But in that learning management system, all of us as supervisors, we can go into the system and see where all of our staff is progressing towards their objectives, and we can look at how we can get them more support or time off to do a project, those kinds of things like that. So it's, thankfully, we're not the shoemaker's children kind of story in our system, but we're able to take advantage of a lot of opportunities for learning.
Well, thank you. And now getting up kind of into the last 10 minutes here, I'm going to ask each panelist to take about 90 seconds and address our last question. So we can't predict the future, but we now have the opportunity to define the future for ourselves. So thinking about the ideal world, what would the future of organizational digital IT look like for your organization? And I'd also ask maybe if you could comment too on a point that was posed by Barry Broom in the chat about the loss of jobs we've seen, and many from disadvantaged communities, and how we can make sure that this doesn't end up in a disparity in the future. So being thoughtful about that. So Alan, maybe I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I think just to leverage Lou and the other panelists' answers, the biggest thing we need is an ability to help teach people how to learn, that agility and going out and trying to figure out for yourself. I mentioned, some of my first, entree into healthcare was implementing HIPAA, and I was training nurses on how to use, at that time, a mouse. They had always used F keys and tabbing, and click and drag was hard. So my trick at that time was I'd sit them down and have them play solitaire for the first 10 minutes of our class, and then we'd get into the class. We're going to need to find the solitaire for today's, culture that'll get people over that anxiety, so that they don't cop out with the, oh, I'm not good at technology answer, and get them over that anxiety and get them learning how to learn, so that they'll be able to be more productive and effective in the new workforce. So that's kind of what I see is the next thing. We got to figure out the solitaire for digital age.
It might be Fortnite.
Could be.
If we could figure out how to get the community colleges into Fortnite, I think you'd solve a bunch of problems there. Lou, how about you? Comments on that last question here?
Well, I've long been of the belief that we're generating tremendous amounts of data, but not leveraging that tremendous amount of data. And the gap between what we would consider a data scientist and a regular human being hasn't closed at all in the last 10 years, in my opinion. And so I think that's what I like to see is as we're able to tap into so much data about how people are using the systems and when they're logging on and what errors are being thrown and all these things, that we're able to design systems in such a way that we automatically figure out what it's going to take to make those individuals successful. So data access, integration, master data management, data science, et cetera, those kinds of things, I think, represent really the future of what I think digital IT is going to have to cross over. So
certainly the ability to consume and extrapolate insights from data is going to be in critical. And you just look at what we're dealing with COVID and being able to ascertain how we handle the amazing amounts of data we're getting and being able to see the patterns and then getting the insights. That definitely is the frontier.
The colleges were just told by the state that for us to open up for in-person classes again, we have to have a system to track contacts between humans. So like if a person who's enrolled in one particular class gets COVID, we have to be able to contact all the people that they've come in contact with at the school. That's a brand new application for us, and we're really scrambling trying to figure out where we can buy one. So if you know anybody who's selling one, it's a good time to talk to
well, actually, you should reach out to me. It's interested in kind of some of that work. Shazad, how about yourself?
I agree with Alan and Lou's points for sure. One thing I used to learn when I was a kid in a different part of the world, that teachers used to say, world is a global village. And I think COVID-19 has actually pushed the boundary and made us that one village very quickly. And the way I want to connect that is in all of the challenge that's come with COVID-19 of us having to work remotely and people having to learn new things and new ways of working. At the same time, it's a huge opportunity as well. And in Power School, for example, we used to only have our distributed workforce in 3 or 4 different countries. And because we were only able to certify all of our, let's say, the rules of engagements with those cities and companies that we had previously acquired. And now all of a sudden, as the company has learned to work differently in fully distributed 100% remote model, we are now tapping into, or at least looking into tapping into resources from various parts of the world and various parts of the country even. So we're not even only looking at Sacramento or San Francisco area. We're now going into central parts of the country and other areas. And so my, in my sort of dream world, the industry should, tech industry should absolutely be leading the way in providing that borderless opportunity for all the communities. So if people can learn 3 words of upskill, 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 then what you will find is there's tremendous amount of opportunity around, and it's outside the confines of our normal thinking mechanism of only local jobs and only certain commutable distance jobs. It's opening up a huge Pandora box of opportunity. Being a globalist myself, I never stay in one country for more than a few years. I am just seeing this as a thanks Corona in many ways as well.
Thanks, Corona. What a way to sign off. On that, I'd like to thank all of you for the engaging conversation and for answering the audience Q&A. I think this has been a valuable conversation, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how this conversation continues as things continue to shift and adapt. If the attendees on this call do have any questions about any of the resources or comments that were made today or anything else that was not addressed, GSEC will be sending out a follow-up survey to everyone on today's call. You can submit any remaining questions you have through that survey and they will get you an answer, or at the very least get you connected to someone who can help to answer your question. This webinar is the final installment in a 3-part series produced by GSEC in partnership with Experis IT. If you'd like to go back and view any of the previous webinars in this series, the information on the screen now will direct you to where you can find those links and register for additional webinars that are going to be hosted by GSEC. And now that we're at the end of today's program, I'd like to pass it over to GSEC CEO Barry Broom to provide some final thoughts.
Yeah, well, first out, thank you. And I think one of the most important things we could do now, the economy is going to recover. So from an optimistic standpoint, it's going to recover cleaner. It's going to recover more accessible. I mean, I think jobs are going to be more accessible. I think the big metros won't dominate the job base as much, and second-tier communities will be able to do better by themselves. And hopefully that takes some pressure off the LAs and the San Franciscos and the Seattles, so some of the working people in those communities can avoid negative impacts of gentrification and be able to get their communities back. So we're hoping that this wealth gets more distributed geographically, but it's also important that it gets more distributed by by constituency. You cannot have Latinx, African American communities being completely left behind in this move towards technology and digitalization. So we're going to be looking to everyone on this call to help us do a better job at getting hard digital skill sets into our communities so that we can bring more folks along, getting rid of the digital divide. Just to give you a quick snapshot on how serious this is, right now, SAC Unified has 40,000 kids that have been home online learning. 50% of the parents can't operate a Chrome. Half our kids aren't even in school right now over the inability to manage a Chrome and be accessible to the curriculum from their household. So as this rapid transformation is occurring, I think I saw Eric Schmidt of Google saying we're going to have 10 years of rapid digital transformation within 12 months. It's really important that we're on top of it. So I'm going to thank Lou for his chat. We're going to train and hire 100, hopefully young, disadvantaged youth in a hard digital skill. We're going to know within a month when we can launch. It's going to be a pilot project. It's going to focus on Salesforce certifications, Microsoft. 50 will be IT. 50 will be hopefully almost in software, junior software engineering skill set. In order to get that 100 off the ground, I'm going to call that like our Apollo astronaut program. We're going to need to guarantee jobs for 100 of those graduates. So the Urban League is going to do the outreach. We're going to enter into it a partner with General Assembly. We've been talking with Brian King about the community colleges to down the road replace General Assembly and do this more rapidly. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could train and give hard skills to 1,000 or 2,000 young adults, dislocated workers of colors every year in this community and take them out of poverty, not to a $15 an hour a year job, but take them out of poverty and let them have a job that pays $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. It allows them to have the same access to healthcare, jobs, economic security, and food security that all of us have. I think these are the kind of things that we're thinking about more than ever as a community. So this has gone from kind of a side project objective that we've been developing the last year to kind of a core objective in our community. And we're going to need everybody in our community to step up and support these kind of initiatives. So I want to thank everyone for being on the panel today. Jennifer, I want to thank you for your support. We want to get back in conversation with the center. We need leadership. I mean, we're generalists. We're good at just about everything, but we're barely an expert on anything. So, you know, we need our community leaders that are experts like this panel that are looking over our shoulder. We'll be doing other hard skills like welding and machinery and equipment and electrification vehicles. So the California Mobility Center is going to do hard skills. The Aggie Square is going to do hard skills on science. And then the Urban League in Greater Sacramento is going to work on digital skills. So we're going to need all the help we can get. And I'm really looking forward to working with everyone. Let's wear masks, we'll keep our head up, be optimistic, and I thank everybody for their time today.